The Delta Network, powered by Delta Waterfowl.
Mom, I want to listen to the voice of the duck hunter.
I think maybe you go back long enough, 100 years, maybe that's too far, maybe that's not far enough. There were, live decoys. There probably was the intentional spreading of bait to hunt over it. That was probably a great practice for market hunting and things like that. So what's the appropriate entry point if we're going to talk about the history of baiting from a waterfowl hunting standpoint?
Well, I'll start, and then I'm going to segue it over to Jay. Migratory Bird Treaty Act, which is one of our oldest federal legislations. I mean, Lacey Act predates it, 1900. Migratory Bird Treaty Act, our first signature was in 1916. So nobody's around today that was around back then. And that was with Canada. It was with Great Britain on behalf of Canada. We signed a second treaty with Mexico in 1936. And each and every time that we had a treaty with a country, the birds that were in common that migrated were put on this list, the Migratory Bird Treaty Act list. And then you have 1972, and that was with Russia, I believe. And then 1978 with Japan. So we have 4 countries. Everyone's going, where are you getting these countries from? Well, we all share birds in common. So this list was created. And with that list, obviously there were some do's and don'ts. And so, Jay, I will segue over the history of the baiting aspect of that. So, I mean, the Migratory Bird Treaty Act, for the purpose of the listeners, 1916. Okay, so it goes back. It's not something that was just recent. Mm-hmm. As far as the baiting is concerned, Jay, you want to take it from here?
Yeah, we can delve into it, and again, Rich, just jump in whenever you think you want to add something. I would say Rich is right. When you want to start talking about the migratory birds, you've got to start with the treaty itself, and even the formulation of that treaty, which was finalized in 1916, and then the act in 1918 thereafter to promulgate it into a statute or a law for the United States. All the events from, and I would say probably late 1800s, early 1900, there were several pushes to get this law into place for migratory birds. And I say that because you can go back and say that as early as 1900, late 1800s, there was a need, and Congress, the public, sportsmen realized that we need to do something to protect all these birds. And I think the one greatest catalyst that really started focusing on it was, as everybody knows, is probably the passenger pigeon. I mean, you watch any story, I've read books on it, just thousands and millions of birds just taking over and making the sky dark, and the sound of the wings because they come over you is just deafening, like the ocean waves crashing along the shoreline. And to go from that to none in a short period of time, conservationists, sportsmen, they all said we got to do something. So there was an evolution that took time to try and get to the act. They tried several laws to enact. They never did float. They didn't pass constitutional muster, if you will. So that's where they came up and said, we'll make a treaty with Canada, and then through that treaty, we'll make a statute. And that statute was upheld. Basically, I think it was Missouri versus Holland shortly thereafter. But in that case law, the Supreme Court justice basically said a treaty is the supreme law of the land. So if you look at the Migratory Bird Treaty Act and the statute that promulgates on it, it's foundationally based, is so strong that law has survived, however, 1918 to where we are now, 110 years, whatever the math is on that, is amazing. And one thing you have to realize is the Migratory Bird Treaty Act is the most litigated wildlife law ever. There's more case law in the Migratory Bird Treaty Act than there is any other conservation or wildlife law. So it's, and I say that when we talk about baiting and where the baiting regs are, because of that case law and because of sportsmen and hunter sentiment, the baiting laws have morphed since they were first enacted. So anything you want to add to that, Rich? And I just say that just as a foundation.
Jay said that the Migratory Bird Treaty Act is the most mitigated law that we have.
Litigated.
Well, yeah, in other words, it's contentious. It's
Yeah.
changing, it's morphing, it's being challenged. Of all the prohibitions of this most mitigated law, federal law, baiting is right on the X as
Okay.
far as, so there's been lots of regulations and prohibitions, and they've morphed to some degree and they've changed to some degree. But the first baiting regulation that hit the books was in 1935. So Jay mentioned 1918 is when it finally became something that was real, something that was on the books. It wasn't until 1935 that it finally, we had a prohibition against baiting. And you can think of the dirty 30s, you can think of waterfowl populations crashing, you know, obviously bait works. Anyone that likes eating at buffets like myself, bait works, you know. If you're looking for something to fill you up quickly, you know, versus having to forage all day and hopefully get a few seeds or a few kernels, you go to where you can eat.
Right.
It's all energetics for these animals. They got to put feed on, they got to put weight on, body conditioning on for migration. And we can cover a little bit about that maybe further down the road. But 1935 is when it hit the books. From 1918 to 1934, there wasn't a baiting regulation.
Mom, I want to listen to the voice of the duck hunter.